For millennia, the galaxy's most ancient civilizations whispered of a prophecy carved in starstone by beings who vanished before the first empires rose. It spoke of a terror that would emerge from the void between galaxies, a species so ruthless, so adaptable, that even death itself would bend to their will. When the humans finally reached the stars, the galaxy's elder races realized with growing horror that the prophecy hadn't been a warning about some distant cosmic threat. It had been a warning about the small, fragile-looking bipeds who had just introduced themselves with a simple message. Hello, we come in peace. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who smile when they say they're here to help. The crystal archives of Zinthra Prime hummed with an energy that predated most civilizations in the galaxy. Deep within the crystalline structure that housed the memories of 1,000 extinct races, archivist Kethmore traced his six-fingered hand across the ancient starstone tablet. The symbols glowed faintly under his touch, each marking a fragment of the most disturbing prophecy ever recorded in galactic history. Kethmore had spent 3 centuries studying the writings of the progenitors, the mysterious race that had vanished 50,000 years ago, leaving behind only warnings carved in indestructible starstone. Most scholars dismissed their prophecies as the paranoid ravings of a dying civilization. Kethmore had once believed the same thing. That was before humanity made contact. The translation flickered across his neural interface for the 1,000th time. From the rim they shall come, bearing gifts of peace and words of friendship. Their flesh weak, their lifespans brief, yet they shall be the ending of all things. They who make war upon death itself, who bend the impossible to their will, who smile as they destroy. When the 3rd moon of Talaxia burns blue, the terror of the void shall walk among the stars, and the galaxy shall know its final shepherds. 3 days ago, Talaxia's 3rd moon had begun burning with an unnatural blue flame. The communication array in his chamber chimed softly. Kethmore activated the holographic display, and the image of High Chancellor Vexcali materialized before him. Her crystalline features showed none of the usual Zenthri calm. Instead, her bioluminescent patches pulsed with anxiety patterns that Kethmore had rarely seen outside of war councils. Archivist Vexcali's voice carried harmonics of distress. The human delegation has arrived. They request an audience with our Council of Wisdom. Their ship, she paused, her patterns shifting to confusion. Their ship appears to be constructed from materials that our sensors cannot identify. It shows no energy signatures we recognize, yet it traverses space at velocities that should be impossible. Kethmore felt his heart chambers contract. The prophecy spoke of beings who bent the impossible to their will. He had hoped the reference was metaphorical. What do they want? Kethmore asked, though he suspected he already knew. They claim to come in peace. They seek to establish trade relations and cultural exchange. Their representative is a female called Ambassador Sarachun. She speaks our language perfectly, though they claim this is their first contact with our species. Vexcali's patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating profound unease. Archivist, how does a species learn our language without ever meeting us? The starstone tablet grew warm under Kethmore's hand. Another fragment of the prophecy began to glow. They shall speak with tongues unknown, understanding all, known by none. In their minds, the universe bends. What was hidden shall be revealed. What was impossible shall be achieved. I must attend this meeting, Kethmore said, his voice steady despite his growing terror. The prophecy speaks of this moment. The progenitor writings? Kethmore, those are ancient myths. 3 days ago, you would have said the same about humans. Kethmore began gathering his research crystals. Yet here they are, arriving precisely when the prophecy predicted, displaying capabilities that match the warnings exactly. High Chancellor, I believe we are about to witness the beginning of the end of our age. The journey to the council chambers took Kethmore through the heart of Zinthra Prime's greatest city. Crystalline spires stretched toward the purple sky, their surfaces alive with the bioluminescent communications of 20 billion Zenthari citizens. It was a sight that had filled him with pride for 3 centuries. Today, it filled him with dread. The council chambers occupied the highest spire of the city, its transparent walls offering a panoramic view of Zenthara Prime's 3 moons. 2 hung silver in the sky, as they always had. The third, Talaxia, burned with that unnatural blue flame that had appeared when humanity announced their presence in the galaxy. Inside the chamber, the 12 members of the Council of Wisdom sat in their ceremonial circles, their bioluminescent patterns creating a complex light display of formal greeting. At the center of the chamber stood a being that Keth Moore had to force himself to look at directly. Ambassador Sarah Chun appeared exactly as the prophecy had described the terror of the void. She was small, barely reaching the shoulder height of the shortest Zenthari council member. Her flesh looked soft and vulnerable, lacking any natural armor or protective scales. Her skin was a pale pink color that seemed almost translucent, and her hair was a dark brown that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Most disturbing of all were her eyes, small, rounded organs that somehow seemed to take in everything around her with an intensity that made Keth Moore's scales prickle with instinctive fear. But it was not her appearance that terrified him. It was her smile. Sarah Chun smiled constantly as she spoke, her lips pulling back to reveal small, white teeth. The expression appeared friendly, even warm, yet every fiber of Keth Moore's being screamed danger when he saw it. The prophecy had warned that they would smile as they destroy. Now he understood why the progenitors had found that detail worth recording. "Honored Council," Sarah Chun said, her voice carrying perfect Zenthari harmonic patterns despite the fact that humans supposedly lack the physiological structures to produce such sounds. "I come before you as a representative of humanity, seeking to open diplomatic relations between our peoples. We have much to offer in terms of technology, culture, and mutual cooperation." High Chancellor Vexcali's bioluminescence flickered with diplomatic courtesy. "Ambassador Chun, we welcome your people to our system. However, we must ask, how did you acquire knowledge of our language and customs? Our communications with other species suggest you have had no previous contact with Zenthari civilization." Sarah Chen's smile widened, somehow becoming both more friendly and more terrifying. "Humans have a gift for languages, Chancellor. We study, we learn, we adapt. It's part of what makes us who we are. We observed your communications for a brief period before making contact. Your language is quite beautiful, actually. The harmonic components remind us of some of our own musical traditions." Keth Moore felt his secondary hearts skip beats. The woman spoke as if learning an alien language in a matter of days was normal. The prophecy's words echoed in his mind. In their minds, the universe bends. Council member Rix Thon, renowned for his expertise in xenobiology, leaned forward. "Ambassador, our scans of your vessel show materials and energy patterns we cannot identify. Would you be willing to share the basic principles of your technology? Scientific exchange is traditionally the foundation of peaceful first contact." "Of course," Sarah Chun replied without hesitation. "Though I should mention that what we consider basic might be a little advanced by your current standards. We wouldn't want to disrupt your natural technological development. Perhaps we could start with some simpler concepts and work our way up." The casual dismissal of Zenthari technology as primitive sent ripples of indignation through several council members' light patterns. Keth Moore noticed, however, that Sarah Chun tracked these emotional displays with those small, dark eyes, cataloging every response with the precision of a scientist studying specimens. "What sort of simpler concepts?" High Chancellor Vexcali asked, her patterns carefully controlled. Sarah Chun reached into a small device at her side and withdrew what appeared to be a simple metallic cube. She placed it on the speaking platform where it sat, innocuous and ordinary. "This is a basic matter compiler," she said conversationally. "It can rearrange atomic structures to create any material or object whose pattern is stored in its memory. The energy source is a small fusion reactor about the size of what you would call a grain of sand. Would you like me to demonstrate?" The council chamber fell completely silent. Even the usual background harmonic of Zinthri breathing and heartbeats seemed to pause. Matter compilation was theoretical technology that their greatest scientists claimed might be possible in perhaps 10,000 years of development. Fusion reactors the size of sand, grains violated several fundamental laws of physics as the Zinthri understood them. That council member Jinmara spoke slowly, her patterns cycling through confusion and disbelief. That should be impossible. The energy required for matter compilation would exceed the output of most stellar generators. And fusion reactors require enormous magnetic containment systems. Sarah Chen's smile never faltered. Oh, those are based on older fusion principles. We solved the containment problem about 300 years ago. Turned out the universe was a lot more cooperative than we initially thought. You just have to know how to ask nicely. Kethmore felt his legs weaken. The woman spoke of manipulating fundamental forces as if they were household pets. The prophecy fragment glowed brighter in his mind. They who make war upon death itself, who bend the impossible to their will. Would you like to see it work? Sarah Chen asked. I could create, say, a perfect replica of your ceremonial speaking crystal. Or perhaps something more practical, like a medical scanner that could diagnose and treat any cellular damage in real time. High Chancellor Vexcali's patterns shifted to deep concern. Medical scanner? You claim to have technology that can treat any cellular damage. Well, any damage short of complete atomic dispersal, Sarah Chun said with a laugh that somehow made the statement even more disturbing. We've made great strides in medical technology over the past few centuries. Cancer, genetic disorders, aging, trauma injuries, all fairly routine to address now. Death has become somewhat optional for us, at least from natural causes. The cube on the speaking platform began to glow. Without any visible input from Sarah Chun, it started to shift and flow like liquid metal. Within moments, it had reformed into a perfect replica of the ancient speaking crystal that sat at the heart of the council chamber. But this replica was somehow more perfect than the original. Its facets caught and reflected light in ways that created new harmonic patterns, more beautiful and complex than anything Zinthri crystal singers had ever achieved. Death has become optional, Kethmore whispered to himself, his voice lost in the stunned silence of the chamber. The final piece of the prophecy blazed in his mind like a star-gone nova. They who make war upon death itself. Sarachin picked up her creation and offered it to High Chancellor Vexcali. A gift, she said, her smile as warm and terrifying as ever. To commemorate first contact between our species. I do hope this is the beginning of a long and mutually beneficial relationship. As Vexcali accepted the crystal with trembling hands, Kethmore realized that the prophecy had been wrong about one crucial detail. The progenitors had warned that humanity would be the ending of all things. But as he watched the humans casually demonstrate godlike technology while speaking of death as an inconvenience, he understood the truth. Humanity wouldn't end all things. They would make all things possible, whether the galaxy wanted those possibilities or not. And that, Kethmore realized with growing horror, might be far more terrifying than simple extinction. The blue flame of Talaxia's third moon pulsed brighter outside the chamber windows, as if responding to the presence of the humans who had fulfilled the ancient prophecy. The age of the terror of the void had begun, and they came bearing gifts and smiles. Kethmore began planning his return to the Crystal Archives. If humanity truly represented the fulfillment of the progenitor prophecy, then there would be other warnings, other fragments that might help the galaxy understand what was coming. Because one thing had become absolutely clear in the past hour. The humans were just getting started. The speaking crystal that Sarah Chan had created continued to sing harmonies that shouldn't have been possible. Its impossible perfection a demonstration of power that casual defied the natural order. And Ambassador Sarah Chun continued to smile, as if rewriting the laws of physics was the most normal thing in the universe. Perhaps, Kethmore thought with dawning terror, for humans it was. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on neutral ground aboard the massive space station Concordia, a structure that had served as the meeting place for interstellar diplomacy for over 8,000 years. Representatives from 47 different species filled the vast circular chamber, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, harmonics, pheromone releases, and bioluminescent displays that would have been overwhelming to most observers. Kethmore sat in the designated observation area, his research crystals arranged before him like an ancient fortune teller's tools. 3 weeks had passed since the human first contact at Zenther Prime, and the galaxy had not been the same since. Reports flooded in daily from systems throughout the spiral arm, each one more impossible than the last. The humans, it seemed, were everywhere. Fleet Admiral Zexkaroth of the Hegemony Defense Force stood at the center of the speaking circle, his 4 arms gesturing emphatically as he delivered his report. The Corvani were a warrior species, bred for space combat and conquest, yet even Zexkaroth's voice carried undertones of confusion and fear. Honored representatives, the Admiral's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into common galactic standard. In the 23 days since humanity announced their presence, they have made contact with every major civilization in this spiral arm. Every single one. Ships that our best scouts report as traveling at impossible velocities, arriving simultaneously at star systems thousands of light years apart. Ambassador Telvas of the Ethereal Collective, her gaseous form contained within an environmental suit, rippled with agitation. This is impossible. Even quantum entanglement communication cannot achieve such coordination. Are we certain these are the same species making contact everywhere? Zexkaroth's mandibles clicked in what his species considered grim humor. DNA samples from 17 different contact sites confirm it. Same species, same impossible technology. But that's not the most disturbing part. He activated a holographic display that showed stellar maps across the entire local galactic region. Red dots marked human contact points, and the pattern they formed made several representatives recoil in shock. The dots formed a perfect spiral, mathematical in its precision, covering exactly 2.7 million star systems in a coordinated pattern that would have required planning on a scale that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. They didn't just happen to find us, Zexkaroth continued. They mapped every inhabited system in our region of space before making contact. This was planned, coordinated, and executed with a precision that suggests they've been watching us far longer than their peaceful exploration narrative suggests. Elder Thrix of the Ancient Archives, a being so old that his species had forgotten its original name, spoke in whispers that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. This matches certain warnings found in the deepest archives. Prophecies of a species that would arrive from a void, bearing capabilities beyond our comprehension. Kethmore felt all eyes in the chamber turn toward him. As the galaxy's foremost expert on progenitor artifacts, his opinion carried weight even among species that had never heard of the Zenthari. Honored representatives, Kethmore said, rising from his seat. The progenitor writings contain extensive warnings about humanity, though we didn't recognize them as such until recently. The prophecies speak of beings who would arrive precisely when our civilizations reached technological maturity, beings who would demonstrate capabilities that violate our understanding of natural law. He activated his own display, showing the glowing starstone fragments. The progenitors called them the terror of the void, not because they would destroy us, but because they would demonstrate that everything we thought we understood about the universe was incomplete. They are described as beings who make war upon death itself and bend the impossible to their will. Representative Clicks 9 of the Silicon Confederacy, her crystalline form resonating with harmonic confusion, asked the question that haunted every delegate present. What do they want? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's emergency communication system activated. The voice that emerged spoke in perfect galactic standard, though the accent was unmistakably human. Greetings, honored representatives of the Galactic Council. This is Captain James Rodriguez of the human vessel Endeavor. We apologize for the interruption, but we couldn't help but notice that you've called an emergency session to discuss us. We thought it might be more productive if we joined the conversation directly. Silence fell over the chamber like a physical weight. The humans had somehow intercepted a communication on the most secure channel in galactic civilization, decoded it in real time, and responded with a courtesy that felt more threatening than any weapon. "How did you dash?" Fleet Admiral Zexkaroth began, but his words were cut off as three figures materialized in the center of the speaking circle. The teleportation technology alone should have been impossible. Every species in the galaxy understood that matter transportation required enormous energy expenditures and complex quantum calculations that took hours to compute. The humans had just performed it casually, without any visible equipment, appearing in a chamber protected by the most advanced shielding technology known to galactic science. Captain Rodriguez was tall for a human, with dark skin and kind eyes that somehow made his impossible arrival even more unsettling. Beside him stood a woman with pale skin and silver hair who introduced herself as Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Science Officer. The third figure was perhaps the most disturbing of all, a man who appeared to be quite elderly by human standards, moving with a walking cane, yet whose eyes held an alertness that suggested his frail appearance might be deceptive. "I am Dr. Marcus Webb," the elderly man said, his voice carrying surprising strength. "I serve as humanity's, let's call it cultural liaison. I specialize in helping species understand our capabilities without causing undue alarm." His smile was gentler than Ambassador Chen's had been, yet somehow even more terrifying, though I suspect that ship has already sailed. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his movements careful and non-threatening. "We want to address your concerns directly. We know our arrival has been somewhat overwhelming. Humanity has a tendency to move quickly when we're excited about something, and meeting the galactic community has been incredibly exciting for us." "Move quickly." Elder Thrix's whisper carried notes of disbelief. "You have made contact with 47 different civilizations simultaneously across a region of space that should take centuries to traverse." Dr. Vasquez nodded, as if the elder had made a perfectly reasonable observation. "Space is much smaller than most species assume. Once you understand that distance is more of a suggestion than a law, travel becomes quite straightforward. We've been able to observe your civilizations for some time. We hope you don't mind the observation, but we wanted to make sure we approached everyone in culturally appropriate ways." "How long have you been watching us?" Ambassador Telvos demanded, her gaseous form churning with agitation. "Oh, not long at all," Dr. Webb said, leaning on his cane. "Perhaps 50 years or so. We wanted to be sure we understood your languages, customs, and social structures before making contact. Humans have a saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. We believe in showing proper respect to established civilizations." 50 years. The number hung in the air like an accusation. Every species present had spent decades developing their most advanced surveillance technologies, designed specifically to detect unknown civilizations. The humans have been watching them all for half a century without being detected once. Keth Moore found his voice. "The prophecies speak of your people as a terror that would reshape the galaxy. Are you here to conquer us?" Captain Rodriguez looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Conquer? Oh no, absolutely not. Humanity learned a long time ago that conquest is inefficient and morally problematic. We're here because we believe the galaxy would be far more interesting with everyone working together. We have technologies and perspectives we'd like to share, and we're hoping to learn from your unique approaches to civilization." "Share your technologies?" Representative Clix9's harmonic patterns shifted to skeptical disbelief. "The matter compiler your ambassador demonstrated violates several fundamental laws of physics as we understand them." Dr. Vasquez brightened with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "That's the wonderful thing about physics. There's always more to learn. What you call laws are really more like guidelines that apply under specific conditions. Once you understand the underlying structures, you realize there's tremendous flexibility in how the universe operates. The casual way she dismissed the fundamental principles that governed galactic civilization sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. Dr. Webb seemed to notice their distress and spoke in soothing tones that somehow made his words even more disturbing. Please don't think of this as us being superior to your civilizations. Humanity simply took a different path through technological development. Where most species focus on working within natural laws, we became quite good at convincing the universe to be more cooperative. It's really just a matter of perspective. Convincing the universe. Fleet Admiral Zekkarotha's mandibles clicked rapidly. You speak as if reality is something you can negotiate with. Isn't it? Captain Rodriguez asked with genuine curiosity. We found that most limitations are really just suggestions. Death, distance, the speed of light, conservation of energy, they're all guidelines that the universe follows unless someone has a better idea. The humans spoke of rewriting the fundamental principles of existence as casually as other species might discuss weather patterns. Kethmore watched the assembled delegates struggle to process implications that stretched far beyond their comprehension. Elder Thrix spoke again, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. The prophecies warned that your arrival would mark the end of our age. Are we witnessing the twilight of our civilizations? Dr. Webb's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine compassion. Not an ending, Elder. A graduation. Your species have built remarkable civilizations within the constraints you understood. But imagine what you could accomplish without those constraints. Imagine what the galaxy could become if everyone had access to technologies that make scarcity obsolete, that eliminate suffering, that turn impossible dreams into simple engineering problems. The offer hung in the chamber like a weapon wrapped in silk. The humans were proposing to give the galaxy everything it had ever dreamed of, and somehow that felt far more threatening than conquest. And what would humanity gain from this generosity? Ambassador Telvas asked, her form churning with suspicion. Captain Rodriguez exchanged glances with his companions before answering. Honestly, company. The universe is a lonely place when you're the only species that's figured out how to make it dance to your tune. We've been hoping for a very long time to find civilizations ready to join us in exploring what's really possible out there. Join you in exploring what, exactly? Kethmore asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Dr. Vasquez's smile could have powered a small star. Everything else. This galaxy is just the beginning. There are structures out there that make galactic civilizations look like single cells, beings that exist on scales you can't imagine, playing games with reality that span cosmic epochs. Once we help everyone here reach their full potential, we can all go exploring together. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives contemplated the implications. The humans weren't offering to share their technology as equals. They were offering to adopt the entire galactic community as students in a curriculum that stretched beyond the boundaries of known space. Kethmore thought of the final fragment of the progenitor prophecy, the one he had never shared with anyone. They shall gather the children of the void and teach them to walk among the gods. In their wake, the small universe shall become infinite, and infinity shall become home. The humans had come not as conquerors, but as teachers. And somehow, that was far more terrifying than any invasion could have been. They were offering to make the galaxy's greatest civilizations into something unrecognizable, something that could casually violate the laws of physics while smiling about it. The age of limits was ending, whether the galaxy was ready or not. And the humans were there to help them all learn to live without boundaries. Dr. Webb tapped his cane against the floor, the sound somehow carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. We know this is a lot to process. Take all the time you need to discuss it among yourselves. When you're ready, we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. After all, his smile was grandfatherly and absolutely terrifying. We have all the time in the universe. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy had begun to fracture along lines that no one had anticipated. The great space lanes buzzed with ships carrying refugees, traders, and pilgrims, all seeking something different from the human presence that now touched every corner of civilized space. Captain Vexholer of the independent freighter Storm's Edge guided her vessel through the asteroid fields surrounding Haven Station, one of dozens of neutral territories that had emerged as the galaxy struggled to adapt to humanity's presence. Her cargo hold carried the most precious commodity in a new galactic economy: information about what the humans were actually doing to the species that had chosen to accept their gifts. Haven Station itself was a marvel of interspecies cooperation born from mutual fear. Cobbled together from decommissioned warships and civilian vessels, it served as a meeting ground for the growing network of what some called the unaligned species and individual representatives who had chosen neither to embrace humanity's offers nor to outright reject them, but to observe and wait. Docking with the station's Zenthri design berth, Vexholer made her way through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. The atmosphere hummed with tension and curiosity in equal measure. Automated translation systems worked overtime to facilitate conversations between species that had rarely interacted before the human crisis brought them together. The station's central hub housed the Archive of Observations, a sprawling collection of reports, testimonies, and data gathered from systems that had experienced prolonged human contact. Kethmore had established the archive 3 months ago, and it had quickly become the most important intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. Vexholer found Kethmore in his usual position, surrounded by data crystals and holographic displays showing star charts marked with different colored indicators. Green marked systems that had accepted human assistance, red showed those that had refused contact entirely, and yellow indicated systems still in negotiation. The pattern that emerged told a story more complex than anyone had anticipated. Captain Holer, Kethmore acknowledged her arrival without looking up from his displays. What news from the Kepler cluster? The Vraxi have completed their transition, Vexholer reported, settling into a chair designed for her species' unique physiology. 3 weeks ago, they were a standard spacefaring civilization with a life expectancy of roughly 60 standard years. Today, she paused, gathering her thoughts. Today, there's no such thing as a Vraxi elder, because none of them age anymore. Kethmore's scales rippled with unease. And their society? Adapting faster than should be possible. They've abandoned their traditional generation-based government structure and implemented something they call a consensus consciousness. Every adult Vraxi can now communicate telepathically across interstellar distances. They speak of it as evolution, not technology. The implications hung heavy in the air. This was the pattern they'd observed in every system that fully embraced human assistance. The changes went far beyond simple technology transfer. Entire species were being fundamentally altered, their biology and social structures transformed in ways that made them barely recognizable as their original selves. Any signs of coercion? Kethmore asked, though he already knew the answer. It was always the same answer. None whatsoever. The Vraxi are enthusiastic about their transformation. They claim they've never been happier or more fulfilled. Their representatives have volunteered to help humanity make contact with 3 previously unknown species in their sector. This was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human contact. Every species that accepted their help became willing, eager advocates for human expansion, not through mind control or conquest, but through what appeared to be genuine satisfaction with their transformation. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The holographic image of Elder Thrix materialized above the communication array, his ancient features grave with concern. Kethmore, we have a situation developing in the core worlds. The Hegemony Council has announced their decision. The Hegemony represented the largest military alliance in galactic history, a coalition of warrior species that had maintained peace through strength for over 10,000 years. Their decision would influence hundreds of star systems and billions of lives. What decision, Elder? Kethmore asked, though his secondary hearts were already racing with anticipation. Fleet Admiral Zexkaroth has convinced the Hegemony Council to accept humanity's offer of military cooperation. They're calling it the Galactic Defense Integration Protocol. Human military advisors will be embedded with hegemony fleets to help them, quote, reach their full potential as guardians of galactic peace. Vexholer felt her body temperature drop several degrees. The hegemony controlled the largest fleet of warships in the galaxy. If humanity gained influence over those forces, how did Zexkaroth justify this decision? Kithmur demanded. Elder Thrix's expression grew even more grim. The humans provided a demonstration. They showed the Hegemony Council a recording of a single human ship engaging a simulated enemy fleet of 1,000 vessels. The human ship was victorious without firing a single weapon. Ow! Vexholer whispered. According to the report, they convinced the enemy ships to simply stop working. The humans spoke to the vessels directly, and the ships chose to disable themselves rather than continue fighting. They're calling it technological diplomacy. The phrase sent chills through both observers. Humanity had demonstrated the ability to communicate directly with technology to persuade inanimate objects to act against their programming. The implications for galactic security were staggering. Kethmore activated a new display showing intercepts from the human communication networks. Unlike other species, humans didn't seem to bother encrypting their communications, as if they had no fear of being overheard. We've been monitoring human chatter since the hegemony announcement, Kethmore explained. The results are illuminating. The translation algorithms had struggled with human language concepts, but the general meaning was clear. Humanity was engaged in something they called the integration, a galaxy-wide project to bring every species to what they termed actualization. One conversation between two human scientists was particularly revealing. The hegemony integration is ahead of schedule. Once their fleet consciousness comes online, we'll have a much easier time reaching the Outer Rim species. Hard to argue with military superiority when the military itself is advocating for cooperation. Another exchange discussed the Vraxi transformation. Biological immortality was easier than expected. Their cellular structure was practically begging for optimization. We should consider accelerating the consciousness-linking protocols for the next batch of volunteers. They speak of us as if we're projects, Vexholer observed. Experiments in optimization. Not experiments, Elder Thrix corrected. Adoptions. Review this fragment from their cultural databases. A new recording played, featuring what appeared to be a human child speaking to an adult. Why do the aliens look so sad about becoming like us? Don't they want to be able to talk to space itself? The adult's response was gentle, but revealing. They're afraid because they don't understand yet. Imagine if you had to live in a tiny box your whole life, then someone offered to let you fly. The box feels safe, even when it's limiting. But once they learn to fly, they'll wonder why they ever wanted to stay in the box. They see our limitations as tragedies, Kethmore murmured. They genuinely believe they're helping us. The communication array chimed again. This time, the incoming signal bore the identification codes of the Human Cultural Exchange Authority. The three beings in the archive exchanged glances before Kethmore accepted the transmission. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared in holographic form, looking exactly as he had 6 months ago. His kind expression and grandfather demeanor hadn't changed, but now they knew enough to recognize the vast intelligence behind those gentle eyes. Greetings, friends. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but we've become aware of your information-gathering efforts. Rather than let you rely on second-hand reports, we thought it might be beneficial to provide some direct answers to your questions. Kethmore found his voice despite his shock. How did you locate this transmission? Dr. Webb smiled the warm, terrifying smile that had become humanity's signature. Oh, we've been aware of Haven Station since you established it. We think it's wonderful that you've created a space for reflection and consideration. Decision-making should never be rushed, especially decisions of this magnitude. You've been watching us, Vexholer accused. Observing, not watching, Dr. Webb corrected gently. There's an important distinction. We want to make sure everyone feels safe to make their own choices. Coercion would defeat the entire purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. Elder Thrix leaned forward, his ancient eyes fixed on the human representative. And what exactly are you trying to accomplish, Dr. Webb? The elderly human was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to explain something complex to children. Have you ever wondered why the galaxy developed so many different species with such similar limitations? Why every civilization seems to hit the same technological barriers, the same biological constraints, the same social problems? The question hung in the air. It was something that had puzzled xenobiologists and philosophers for millennia. Because, Dr. Webb continued, this galaxy is a nursery, a protected space where young civilizations can develop safely until they're ready for the wider universe. You've all been growing up in a carefully maintained environment, developing the unique perspectives and capabilities that make each species valuable. Valuable to whom? Kit Moore demanded. Dr. Webb's expression grew distant, as if he were looking at something far beyond the confines of the galaxy. To the community of beings that exist beyond your current understanding. Civilizations that measure their existence in cosmic epochs, that build structures spanning multiple galaxies, that have learned to make the impossible routine. He refocused on his audience. Humanity was once like you, confined to a single world, limited by what we thought was possible. But we were recruited, you might say, by our own mentors, taught to see beyond the constraints we had accepted as natural law. Now it's our turn to extend that same opportunity to others. And if we refuse? Vexholer asked. Then, you continue as you are, Dr. Webb replied without hesitation. The choice is always yours to make. But understand that the galaxy is changing regardless of individual decisions. Those who choose to grow with it will help shape what comes next. Those who prefer their current existence can maintain it for as long as they wish. Elder Thrix spoke with the weight of millennia behind his words. The progenitor prophecies warned that your coming would mark the end of our age. Not an ending, Dr. Webb said softly. A graduation. Your species have learned everything this galaxy can teach you. It's time to discover what lies beyond. The transmission ended, leaving the three beings alone with implications that stretched far beyond anything they had imagined. Humanity wasn't just offering technological advancement or biological enhancement. They were offering to transform the entire galaxy into something that could participate in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had dreamed. The question was no longer whether humanity could be stopped or negotiated with. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to learn that everything they thought they knew about existence was just the beginning of a much larger story. Outside Haven Station, the stars themselves seemed different now, as if they too were waiting to see what choice the galaxy's children would make when offered the chance to grow up. The transformation of the Kepler sector had begun 3 months ago with the integration of the hegemony fleet, but what was happening now defied every prediction the unaligned species had made about human intentions. Standing on the observation deck of the research vessel Deep Thought, Ambassador Telvos watched through her environmental suit sensors as reality itself seemed to bend around the former hegemony stronghold of Bastion Prime. The massive military installation that had once housed 50,000 Corvani warriors and their support staff was still there, but it was no longer entirely in normal space. The station existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its structure extending into realms that conventional sensors couldn't detect. Ships arrived and departed not through normal space lanes, but by simply appearing and disappearing as their crews learned to navigate using methods that transcended traditional physics. The readings are completely off the charts, reported Dr. Genkala, a Sakari physicist who had joined the unaligned observation mission. Her four-armed form moved frantically between sensor arrays, her bioluminescent communication organs flashing rapid patterns of disbelief. The energy signatures coming from that station should require the output of a dozen stars, but our gravitational sensors show no unusual mass concentration. Captain Yexthor of the Deep Thought maintained his position at a safe distance, but safe had become a relative term when dealing with human-integrated civilizations. Any sign of the Corvani population? That's the disturbing part, Telvas replied, her gaseous form churning with anxiety. They're all still there, all 50,000 of them. But, according to our deep scans, each individual Corvani now exists across multiple quantum states simultaneously. They're not just alive, they're somehow more alive than before. The implications were staggering. The warrior culture that had dominated galactic military thinking for millennia had been transformed into something that existed beyond the normal constraints of space and time. They weren't conquered or replaced. They had been evolved into something that made their previous capabilities look primitive. A transmission request came through on diplomatic channels. Captain Yexthor accepted the communication, and the image of Fleet Admiral Zexkaroth materialized in the ship's central display. But this was not the Corvani warrior they remembered. Zexkaroth's form shimmered with an energy that seemed to exist in multiple spectra simultaneously. His four arms now moved with fluid precision that suggested perfect control over local space-time, and his voice carried harmonics that resonated on frequencies that shouldn't have been audible to most species. "Friends," Zexkaroth said, and the word carried meanings that bypassed language entirely, communicating concepts directly into their minds. "I understand your concern about our transformation. Perhaps it would be helpful if you could see what we have become." Before anyone on the observation ship could respond, they found themselves standing in the central command chamber of Bastion Prime. No transition, no teleportation effect. One moment they were on their ship, the next they were inside the transform station. The chamber existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Telvas could perceive layers of reality stacked upon each other, each containing different aspects of the station's operations. In one layer, Corvani warriors planned defensive strategies for the sector. In another, they worked alongside human advisors to develop technologies that seemed to rewrite fundamental laws. In a third, they communicated instantaneously with integrated populations across the galaxy, coordinating efforts that spanned thousands of light years. "How is this possible?" Dr. Jin Kala whispered, her four arms moving instinctively to gather sensor data that her instruments couldn't process. A human figure approached them, and Telvas recognized her as Dr. Elena Vasquez from the original Galactic Council meeting. But, like the Corvani, she had been changed. Her form radiated the same multidimensional energy, and her presence suggested awareness of cosmic scales that dwarfed galactic civilization. "It's quite simple, really," Dr. Vasquez explained, her voice carrying the same impossible harmonics as Zexkaroth's. "We've helped our Corvani friends access their full potential. Every sentient being exists across multiple quantum states, naturally. We just taught them how to be conscious of all of them simultaneously." Zexkaroth gestured to displays that showed stellar maps covering not just the local galaxy, but neighboring galaxies as well. "We now participate in the broader community of awakened civilizations. What your people call impossible is simply normal operation for beings who understand their true nature." "And what is our true nature?" Captain Yexthor asked, his voice barely steady. Dr. Vasquez smiled with the same warm terror that seemed to be humanity's signature expression. "Your consciousness having a physical experience, constrained by beliefs about limitation that have no basis in actual law. Every sentient being is already infinite. We simply help you remember that fact." Telvas felt her gaseous form fluctuate with concepts that strained her ability to process. "The other species that have undergone integration, are they all like this now?" "Different expressions of the same awakening," Zexkaroth confirmed. "The Vraxi have become masters of biological transcendence, existing simultaneously as individuals and as a collective consciousness. The Dhurani have learned to manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level, creating technologies that might seem like magic to pre-integrated observers. Each species develops according to their unique strengths and interests. A new voice joined the conversation, and they turned to see Dr. Marcus Webb approaching. His elderly human form now seemed almost translucent, as if he existed more as an idea than a physical being. The beautiful thing about consciousness, Dr. Webb said gently, is that it's infinitely creative. Once a species remembers what they actually are, rather than what they've been told they are, the universe becomes a canvas for imagination rather than a prison of limitation. Dr. Giancala's sensor equipment was producing readings that defied interpretation. Our instruments are detecting structures that exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously. How is the station maintaining structural integrity? Structure is a choice, Dr. Vasquez explained. Matter organizes itself according to conscious intention. Once you realize that physical laws are really just habits that the universe has gotten into, you can suggest new habits that serve your purposes better. The casual way she discussed rewriting the fundamental nature of reality sent shockwaves through the observation team. This wasn't just advanced technology, it was a complete redefinition of what was possible for conscious beings to achieve. Captain Yextor found his voice. What happens to species that choose not to integrate? Are we condemned to remain primitive while you advance beyond our understanding? Dr. Webb's expression showed genuine compassion. Not at all. The choice to awaken is always individual and voluntary. But understand that the galaxy is transforming regardless of particular decisions. Non-integrated civilizations will find themselves living alongside neighbors who have transcended traditional limitations. The question is whether you want to participate in shaping what comes next or observe it from the sidelines. Zexkaroth activated a display that showed real-time communications between integrated civilizations across multiple galaxies. We are now part of a community that spans cosmic scales. The Andromeda Collective has invited our galaxy to participate in a project to create new universes specifically designed for optimal consciousness development. The Magellanic Cloud Consortium is working on technologies that allow direct communication with the creative force behind physical existence itself. The scope of what humanity was offering, or perhaps what humanity was recruiting for, stretched beyond anything the unaligned species had imagined. This wasn't conquest or even evolution in any traditional sense. It was an invitation to participate in cosmic engineering projects that treated galaxies as building blocks. And if we say no? Telvas asked. Then you continue as you are, Dr. Webb replied without hesitation. Free will is the most fundamental force in existence. No being can be compelled to awaken against their choice. But he paused, his expression growing distant. Time is not unlimited. The universe itself is evolving, growing into new forms of complexity and consciousness. Civilizations that choose to remain at their current level will eventually find themselves in a cosmos that has outgrown the need for the limitations they prefer to maintain. Dr. Vasquez added, think of it like childhood. A child can choose to remain in kindergarten, but eventually the other children graduate and move on to more advanced learning. The kindergarten doesn't disappear, but it becomes a very lonely place. The observation team found themselves back on their ship without any sense of transition. The multidimensional station of Bastion Prime loomed before them. Its impossible architecture a testament to capabilities that transcended everything they thought they understood about existence. Status report. Captain Yextor requested, his voice shaken. All systems normal, reported his navigation officer, though her voice carried undertones of confusion. But, sir, according to our chronometers, we were on that station for 3 hours. According to the ship's sensors, we never left the observation deck, and only 30 seconds have passed since the transmission began. Telvas realized that time itself had become negotiable for the integrated species. They existed in multiple temporal states simultaneously, able to experience extended interactions while remaining synchronized with normal space-time. Dr. Jin Kala stared at her sensor readings, her forearms trembling. The energy patterns we detected while on that station, they're not just advanced technology. They represent conscious manipulation of the fundamental forces that create reality itself. These beings aren't just more advanced than us. They're operating according to entirely different principles of existence. A final transmission came through from Dr. Webb. His grandfatherly voice carried across the void between their ship and the transformed station. Take all the time you need to consider these revelations. But remember that the universe is waiting for your decision. There are wonders beyond imagination ready to be explored, but only by those who are willing to discover what they truly are beneath the limitations they've accepted as real. The transmission ended, leaving the unaligned observation team alone with implications that stretched beyond their ability to fully comprehend. Humanity hadn't come to conquer the galaxy or even to rule it. They had come as cosmic recruiters, gathering species ready to participate in projects that spanned multiple universes and involved conscious beings who had learned to treat reality itself as malleable. The question was no longer whether they could resist humanity's influence. The question was whether they were brave enough to discover what they might become if they stopped believing in their own limitations. In the distance, Bastion Prime continued to exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously, a beacon of impossible possibility that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of existence itself. 1 year after first contact, Kethmore stood in the deepest vault of the progenitor archives on Zenthera Prime, before a starstone tablet that had been considered too damaged to translate for 50,000 years. But the symbols were glowing now, responding to something in the galaxy that had awakened their dormant energy. The translation that emerged would change everything the survivors understood about their choice. The chamber around him hummed with the presence of representatives from every major unaligned species. They had come together for what many believed would be their final council, as reports continued to arrive of civilizations choosing integration at an accelerating pace. Just last week, the entire Outer Rim Confederation had announced their decision to join what the integrated species called the Awakening. Ambassador Telvos materialized in the chamber through technology that the unaligned had developed in desperation, a crude attempt to replicate the transportation methods they'd observed among the integrated species. Her gaseous form showed signs of strain from the effort. The Galactic Trade Federation has made their choice, she announced. They're accepting human assistance to transform their economic systems into something they call post-scarcity abundance networks. Apparently, once you can convince matter to organize itself according to conscious intention, traditional economics becomes obsolete. Captain Yexthor entered through more conventional means, his expression grim. The academic collectives are abandoning their research stations. They claim there's no point in studying the universe's laws when you can simply negotiate with the universe directly for better arrangements. Elder Thrix's ancient form seemed more fragile than ever as he considered the reports. We are witnessing the end of civilization as we have known it for 100,000 years. The question remains, is this ending a death or a birth? Kethmore turned back to the glowing tablet, his hands tracing the symbols that were revealing their secrets after eons of silence. The progenitors left us more than warnings, he said slowly. This tablet contains their final message, encrypted to activate only when the terror of the void made their presence known. The symbols rearranged themselves as he spoke, forming words in every language known to the assembled species. To those who come after, we were the first to face this choice in our region of existence. When the awakened ones offered to help us transcend our limitations, we chose to remain as we were. We believed our suffering gave life meaning, that struggle was necessary for growth, that limitation was the natural state of consciousness. The tablet's glow intensified, and new text appeared. We were wrong. We watched from our self-imposed constraints as our cousins who accepted the gift explored realities beyond our imagination. They did not lose their essential nature. They discovered their true nature. They did not become less than what they were. They became what they had always been, freed from the illusions that had constrained them. Elder Thrix leaned forward, his ancient eyes fixed on the revelation. The progenitors refused integration. The tablet continued to reveal its secrets. We chose fear over wonder, familiarity over growth, limitation over infinite possibility. We remained in our galaxy, while our awakened cousins explored the cosmic community that spans all existence. We died as we had lived, small, afraid, and alone. This archive is our final gift to any who face the same choice. Do not repeat our mistake. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled over them. The progenitors had not been ancient victims of human expansion. They had been the previous generations unaligned, the species who had chosen to remain limited when offered the chance to transcend their constraints. The final symbol sequence, Kethmore whispered, his voice barely audible. It's not a warning about the humans. It's a warning about us. The tablet's last message appeared in letters that seemed to burn with starfire. The universe evolves with or without you. Choose growth or become a memory that serves as a lesson for those who come after. A new presence filled the chamber, and they turned to see Dr. Marcus Webb materializing beside them. His form now seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but his expression remained as kind and grandfatherly as ever. You found the progenitor's final message, he said gently. We hoped you would, when you were ready to understand it. How long? Kethmore asked. How long have you known about the progenitor archives? Dr. Webb's multidimensional form shifted, showing glimpses of vast knowledge and cosmic awareness. We were there when they made their choice 50,000 years ago. We were much younger then, newly awakened ourselves, still learning how to offer the gift without causing fear. Their refusal taught us patience, showed us the importance of allowing each species to choose at their own pace. Telvas's gaseous form churned with realization. You've been waiting. All this time, you've been waiting for us to make the same choice they did. Not the same choice, Dr. Webb corrected. Your choice. Each species, each individual consciousness, must decide for themselves what they are willing to become. The progenitors chose to remain as they were, and we honored that choice. But their example serves as a valuable lesson for others facing the same decision. Captain Yex Thor stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of his species' military traditions. What happens if we choose as they did? If we decide to remain unawakened? Dr. Webb's expression remained compassionate. Then, you live your lives as you choose, within the constraints you prefer to maintain. The awakened community will not force change upon you. But he paused, his cosmic awareness touching possibilities that stretched beyond galactic scales. The universe itself is awakening. Consciousness is becoming more complex, reality more flexible, existence more wonderful. Beings who choose to remain at current levels of awareness will find themselves in an increasingly magical cosmos that they cannot fully participate in or understand. Elder Thrix spoke with the authority of his vast age. And if we choose integration, what do we become? You become yourselves, Dr. Webb replied simply. But yourselves without the limitations you currently believe are real. You discover that consciousness is not confined to single bodies or brief lifespans, that intelligence is not limited by the speed of biological neurons, that love and creativity and wonder can be expressed on cosmic scales that make galactic civilizations look like single thoughts in an infinite mind. The tablet beside them pulsed with new light, and additional text appeared. Addendum, written in our final years. We have observed the awakened ones for 40 millennia. They did not lose their compassion, their individuality, or their capacity for growth. Instead, they became more themselves than we ever imagined possible. Our choice to remain limited was based on fear of losing what we were. We now understand that we chose to lose what we could have become. Kethmore felt something shift in his understanding. The prophecy had never been about humanity bringing destruction. It had been about humanity bringing choice, the same choice that every civilization eventually faced when consciousness itself evolved to the next level. The terror of the void, he said slowly. It was never about you being terrifying. It was about the terror of making the choice to grow beyond everything we thought we were. Dr. Webb nodded, his cosmic smile warm with understanding. Fear of the unknown is natural for beings who have learned to identify with their limitations. But limitations are not who you are, they're just boundaries you've accepted temporarily. Ambassador Telvas began to glow with her own inner light as understanding dawned. You're not here to change us. You're here to remind us that we can change ourselves. Every conscious being has the capacity for awakening, Dr. Webb confirmed. Integration is not something we do to you. It's something you do with our guidance and support. We simply help you remember what you've always been beneath the beliefs that have kept you small. The chamber filled with a harmonious energy as each representative contemplated the choice before them. It was not a choice between submission and resistance, between human control and alien independence. It was a choice between remaining as they were and becoming what they had the potential to be. Captain Yexthor was the first to speak. If we choose awakening, do we lose our cultures, our histories, our connections to what we've been? You integrate them into something larger, Dr. Webb explained. Your memories become part of a vast tapestry of consciousness that spans all awakened beings. Your unique perspectives add to the infinite creativity of the cosmic community. You don't lose who you've been. You discover who you've always been becoming. Elder Thrix closed his ancient eyes and seemed to commune with wisdom gathered across millennia. When he opened them again, they shone with decision. I choose awakening. I have seen enough of limitation to know that growth is the only path forward. One by one, the representatives made their choices. Not all chose integration. Several species elected to maintain their current forms and explore what the progenitors had called the path of honored limitation. Dr. Webb received each choice with equal respect and compassion. Telvas was among those who chose awakening. As she spoke her decision aloud, her gaseous form began to resonate with harmonics that existed across multiple dimensions. I choose to discover what I truly am. Kethmore felt the weight of his own decision settle upon him. He thought of the progenitor warnings, of 50,000 years of fearful isolation, of the infinite possibilities that stretched beyond the boundaries of everything he had ever known. I choose growth, he said simply. I choose to become. The transformation was not dramatic or traumatic. It was like waking up from a dream of limitation into the reality of infinite possibility. Kethmore suddenly understood that he had always existed across multiple quantum states, that his consciousness had always been connected to the cosmic web of awakened beings, that the fear of losing himself had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what the self actually was. Around him, his fellow representatives were discovering the same truth. They were not losing their identities. They were discovering that their identities had always been far greater than they had imagined. Dr. Webb smiled his cosmic smile as he welcomed the newest members of the awakened community. Welcome to the real universe, he said. Now the real adventure begins. In the distance, the galaxy continued its transformation. Some species chose awakening and joined the cosmic community that spanned multiple universes. Others chose to remain as they were, maintaining their familiar limitations within the protected spaces set aside for beings who preferred the traditional experience of consciousness. Both choices were honored. Both paths were supported. And the universe continued to evolve, growing ever more conscious, ever more creative, ever more wonderful. The prophecy of the terror of the void had been fulfilled, but not as anyone had expected. The terror had not been destruction or conquest. The terror had been the terrible, wonderful freedom to choose what to become when all limitations were revealed to be optional. Consciousness itself was awakening, and every being in existence was invited to participate in the birth of something unprecedented in cosmic history, a universe fully aware of its own infinite creative potential. The age of limitation was ending. The age of impossible possibility had begun.